I'm going to explain to everybody why ADD is not real. That was like his whole thing. And this
Oh,
was at the time I was going through all this stuff. And I was like,
Good
oh
time.
man, you all know there was a real push
yeah.
against it. Like it was just totally made up at one point. A lot of people just were like, nope, it's not a thing.
Hello and welcome to part 2 of our premiere episode of This Sucks, our podcast, This Sucks. I think we actually named it correctly. If we didn't get anything else right about this podcast, we damn sure got the name right. Because I look like I'm a professional. I'm really not. We'll get to part 2 in just a sec. I do want to just kind of quickly preface a few things. The topics that we're covering in this episode and this part coming up, we're talking about our experiences, our personal experiences with medication, discontinuing medication, being diagnosed as having various components of executive function disorder, commonly known as ADHD. Neurodivergency is another umbrella term that's like executive function disorder. One thing that I believe is important to mention is that we are not medical professionals. We are just 4 dudes talking about our experiences. Nothing we say should ever be used as a way to self-diagnose or whether or not you should take a certain medication or not take a certain medication or exploring the use of medications. That should be between you and a licensed professional. If you use anything us 4 jackasses talk about on YouTube about our life, well, you get what you get. All right, part 2 coming up. If you haven't watched part 1, it's going to be somewhere over here. It is something that like I said, I want to keep an eye on just to make sure. The nice thing is the school that she goes to has a smaller teacher to student ratio, similar to what we got when we went to school.
I wish they had that everywhere.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, boy, we could go on a whole tangent about public school and funding and how it should change. Oh my God. But yeah, she goes to
one thing you can say about that is at least they're still they have the 501, what is it, A or B or whatever.
Yeah, they get the 501s.
That is for, people that learn different, for the ADHDs, the autistics, things like that, so that they do get the attentiveness that they need in school now.
Was that 504 plan?
Yeah. I
think 503 are like Levi's button flyers.
No, that's 501. 501, that's Levi's.
503 is the Portland, Oregon area code.
Okay.
Well, there's that.
So 504, yeah, okay.
Yes, the 504s, because we had to go from 504 by the time the boy was in junior high, and they put him in special ed, and that was only to be able to qualify him for some of the extra help, throughout the school day, like he would go see another teacher to learn a specific thing. I mean, just the way they had it designed, but the only way that we could get him qualified for that was through special ed.
Yeah, it's different now.
Okay.
It grows too. That's one of the cool things. It's like both of my kids
come a long way since we were kids, man.
Yeah. Both of my kids are in advanced classes, and it's because of the 504 and being able to.
So what is that? I've never heard of that.
There's a 504 and there's a IEP too. There's an independent education program, but the 504 is like basically it's a program where you get to stay in your classes, but
there's accommodations and things.
Yeah, so they have a meeting with the parents and all the teachers and the administration every so often, and you say, here's some of the accommodations I'm asking for, and they agree to it, and basically it just all gets written down. And the greatest thing about it is it follows you all the way through school. So once they give it to you, you can't every year you can go into your new teachers and be like, here it is, read up on it, and ask questions, because there are a lot of teachers out there that have, um, you know,
very little understanding
yeah, I think
of,
that's
Yeah.
probably the nicest way to put it.
yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and it is there. Being uneducated in it is not unusual. It's also not necessarily a bad thing. You know, it's they're ignorant of what causes it and the symptoms of it. And I mean, uh, we have to also get used to the fact that ADD, ADHD is used as an excuse for a lot of things
Yeah.
as well. So when you hear, "Oh, this kid is ADHD," oh, well, isn't every kid? Every kid's ADHD these days. Geez, So getting them to actually understand what, yes, he's been diagnosed and he is approved for the 504, and you have to have that diagnosis to get the 504.
Yep, you do.
And so, as long as they understand, yes, this has been diagnosed and he is definitely approved for the 504, here's what he needs, and here's what you're required to give him.
Yeah.
Um,
Oh man,
that
we actually had a deal where getting him tested in order to get him 504 stuff, we ended up getting a misdiagnosis. And ended up, that's when we were like, you know what? We're choosing what's going to happen this time and get this testing done. Because the misdiagnosis part, I was pretty not happy with that individual and how that came out, because that's supposed to be his profession, and it was,
yeah.
to have to get
Well,
into a book and look up the answer because you don't have the answer is real hard for me to diagnose anybody.
how many have you guys when you guys were diagnosed? Um, was it the first time you went in they diagnosed you, or did it take multiple
Mine was the
times?
first time. I don't think there was any question about it.
Matt?
Yeah.
Um, at my at my age, or at our age when we were younger, I couldn't, like today, I can go into my primary care physician and request medication. Like for instance, like when I was younger, it was like you had to go. Like I had to go to a psychiatrist, I think.
Right.
No,
I mean, I did too, but did they diagnose you when the first time you went to get diagnosed? Were they like, "Oh yeah, this guy's ADD," or
no, there was a test, but they were. I mean, I think they had an idea. Like, yeah, probably. It's almost like a spectrum disorder, right? I mean,
3 times for me, 3 times.
That makes
And you
sense.
passed it
The
on the third
first,
time.
well, the first guy, my mom was she was like, "There's something's different. I need to go take him in and see what's going on." And she had been
Something's
reading up
wrong
on
with
ADD
this one.
because it was very she'd seen some things about ADD and she's like, "Huh, that sounds like Jason." And so she took me into a psychologist who gave me a test where I was in a room and he put headphones on me and it beeped, and every time it beeped I clicked a button, and then he would rustle around the room, moving papers and getting up from his chair, folding his chair, unfolding his chair, sitting down, moving around,
Trying to see
doing,
what your attention span would do, all
yeah,
that old crap.
yeah. So the beep
Well, that's
happened
just
every
annoying
13 seconds.
anyway.
Well, but the point is would I hear the beep? I'm supposed to be paying attention to the beep. So
Oh,
did I hear the beep?
okay.
And would I push the button every time it beeps? Well, when it beeps every 13 seconds and you know how to count, you just count to 13 while you're watching what he's doing and you press the button. Yeah,
Hey,
you
just
don't
because it's
have to hear the
ADHD
beep.
doesn't mean we're dumb.
Yeah. So, he's like, "Oh, there's no way this kid's ADHD. He's not ADD. No, he's just slacking." So my mom was like, "Yeah, I don't think so." So she took me to another psychologist, and that psychologist, I don't remember what that test was because it didn't stick out in my head. I think she was just asking me questions and whatnot. And goes to my mom and said, "This is quite possibly the most ADD person I've ever met in my life." And so my mom was like, "Okay, third opinion." So we go to, psychiatrist at this point because they can medicate, and goes to the psychiatrist, and we have a sit down, and my mom's not in the room. It's just me and the psychiatrist. And she goes, then calls my mom in after we have our discussion about how my life's going. And, she tells my mom, yeah, he's ADD. He is definitely on the further end of attention deficit, where more ADD than less. But he's not extreme. He's not an extreme case, like the second psychologist was suggesting. So, it took 3 times before I actually was able to get diagnosed and get meds for it, which is a different section of this. But we'll just say I got medicated and it didn't go well. And, but it took 3 times for them to figure it out. And that's in, mid to mid 80s, right? Late middle 80s when that happened. To these days, they've got much better tests, that they run on the kids and can figure it out a whole lot easier. But back in our day, it was rough, man, because it was just starting to understand that was even there, that ADD was a thing. They hadn't heard of it before the 80s. It wasn't
there was still
even
a
thought
stigma
about.
attached to it, very much.
Oh yeah. ADD was still an excuse at that point.
Yeah.
Oh, it's not real. It's just something that come up to, or something they made up to excuse the behavior of these children. That was a big thing. And it's like, dude, I'm not forgetting to turn in completed homework assignments because I chose to. It's
when I was younger, my brother-in-law, who was my mom's second husband's son, he is about 10 years older than us. And he was going through a PhD program to become a doctor and get his doctorate in like psychology. And he had to write his what's the last paper called that you have to write?
Dissertation
or something.
Yeah.
Thesis or whatever it is. And he chose for his subject, I'm going to explain to everybody why ADD is not real. That was like his whole thing. And this was at the time I was going through all this stuff, and I was like, man.
Shit.
But that was, and you're right. Jason's right. Like there was a real push. You all know there was a real push against it. Like it was just totally made up at one point. A lot of people just were like, nope, it's not a thing.
When I was tested, I think I passed or was diagnosed, whatever you want to call it, just right off the bat. She was like, yeah, just take him home. We couldn't complete the test because he couldn't stop looking outside the window for ambulances because we were next to a hospital. So there's always ambulances going by. I just get up and go run to the window like squirrel.
That's why they had you in the Catholic school. They were hoping to get your ass exercised.
Yeah, get the demons out of me. Get the demons out. So yeah, I think I was put on medication shortly after that. They gave me a stimulant, and they tried 2 different versions because in 1983, 84, they only had 2. And it was the extended release had just come onto the market, and that didn't work at all. My mom was like, nope. Put him back on the other stuff because on this extended release stuff, yeah, it's like he's done. He hasn't taken anything.
Yep.
I never had an adverse reaction to the medication I was given until much, much later when we were living in DC not that long ago. And my primary care physician didn't like the fact that I'd been on a stimulant for so long. And I get his concern. I'm not saying it wasn't unfounded, but he was like, we're going to get you off the stimulant. I'm like, the non-stimulants don't work for me. They don't. Oh, they've changed. Not really, because it's a non-stimulant. That's kind of how it is. I mean,
by definition, it has not changed.
Yeah. So I was like, no, a non-stimulant 40 years ago is still a non-stimulant today. It hasn't changed.
Yes,
and
but we have a different kind of additive now that we've just come up with.
That we just invented.
Stimulant.
Let us know how it goes.
Yeah.
And
I think that,
go ahead.
I was just I was given a stimulant as well, and right away for me it worked. I mean, like the first day it was amazing. And there were times where we had to adjust the dosage for me because I would get a little bit, like, I don't know, feeling kind of sort of just burnout at the end of the day a little bit too much, or I would feel a little bit like I had too much coffee kind of during the middle of the day.
Okay.
So they would adjust the dosage a couple of times, and then we switched medications a few times, just to try some different things. And I tried some of the non-stimulant ones too, and they didn't. They worked with me on my mood probably more than like my attitude, more than. But I would still have a lack of focus. Like when I was on the stimulant medication, I could just, just like they said in The Simpsons, they called the drug focus in, I think, in that show. And that's what it did for me. It would just really help me focus in on stuff. And then I was able to build my life around not taking any medication for the better part of 20, I'd say 20 years after I got finished with school, because I really felt like I needed it for school. But then when I got into doing winemaking, or I got into doing web development, I could do like Kevin was saying. I could change my environment. I could change the way that I could, thrive better with the issues that I had without medication, because it wasn't a box that I had to fit in. It was a box that I wanted to be in.
I feel kind of lucky that I was able to find a medication for me that worked, even though the doctor back in Virginia had his reasons, and I understand them. And we did try things. The worst reaction I had off of medication was, I can't remember the name of it, and I wouldn't say it if I did, but I sat down after my partner went to work and sat down on the couch. And then the next thing I know, she walks back in the door, and I'm like, oh, what'd you forget? She's like, it's 5:45. I'm like, what? No, you just went to work, dude. She's like, no, I'm done with work. Have you been sitting here all day? And I'm like, and then I just looked up at the TV, and it's like Burn Notice reruns. And I'm like, yeah, I guess so. And the more I took that medication, like the worse the slowdown and my time loss would happen. I'm just like, I would have lost all motivation to do anything. And I think I set an appointment with him over the next couple of days. And I was like, we're done with this. I'm not screwing with this. Just put me back on what we know works. I recognize your concerns. If you want me to sign a waiver, I'll do it. But if this works, why are we doing this? Because you don't like it?
I mean, I didn't take anything for a very, very, very long time. And eventually went back to a doctor and had discussions about, look, I don't want to take this, but I'm really struggling with this. And so he's like, okay, well, we're going to prescribe this. And we're not talking like I was 15 years old or 16 years old. I'm an adult in my, late 30s, and it was the first experience was really, really bad. The one medication. The second one, after I switched doctors, much better, but I still had problems shaking, and it wasn't as noticeable. But again, going into phlebotomy, you don't want to have shaking hands when you got a needle in front of somebody and go, "Hey, I'm going to put this in your body. Look at my hands. Oh, hey." So
everything's fine. Don't worry about it.
The third one, he's completely taken a different approach and found more of the root cause of the problem versus this is how you used to be treated with stuff. So I like this guy so much. And so he switched me to this stuff. Now I apologize. I'm making the adjustment literally today. I'm on my second dose, and I've been off of it for over a year because I lost my job and my health insurance. So I lost all my medication, and just finally literally got everything back yesterday, but started back on my main one that I take. And it's right now, it's just the adjustment period and remembering, oh, it felt like this for about 3 to 4 days till it got into my system. And within a couple of weeks, I was just good with everything.
Is it an extended release?
It is. It's
okay.
an XL. It's 150. And
okay.
The only thing that the reason they have me taking it is for MDD that the ADHD has caused over time, because I went not untreated, but unchecked. And so that was, I say it's kind of a blur part of my life. It was not a good part of my life. And that was as an adult. But this stuff basically just helps me control the depression issues that my ADHD causes. And I did not realize how bad the depression had gotten at certain points and things like that. And this is having been a father and all these other things. And I'm like, man, why do I feel like all of a sudden I'm having these emotional crises and stuff like that? Like I've never really had to battle it as much before. And like, I don't know. Eventually, like I said, it just kind of came trickling down. And I say the blurry part of my life, because where those things were missing, I tried to replace them with other things and absolutely did not work. And I knew they weren't going to, but play
right.
Dumb games, win dumb prizes, that kind of thing. And man, I got a whole collection of dumb prizes in my life.
No, I'm right there with you. When I say I wasn't on my medication for 20 years, I was self-medicating with alcohol.
My medication history really, as far as either self-medication or, doctor prescribed, when they put me on my stimulant for ADHD, I was either extremely happy or extremely angry. I was never just there. I was never just enjoying the day as it was. It was one or the other. And the day that I had to stop myself from throwing a desk through the window just simply because a pencil fell off of it, it was that was it. I was done, and that was high school. So I haven't been medicated for ADD since then. I just decided I was going to figure out how to deal with it. I would teach myself how to focus, how to pay attention, how to realize when I'm slipping, realizing when I'm not getting done what needs to get done. And that has been a real driving force for me. Understanding the tics, understanding the drinks that help, the food that helps, the food that doesn't help, things like that. There's a lot of dietary things that I do to keep myself focused. multivitamins, vitamin D, vitamin K, vitamin C, things like that really help me stay focused. Coffee, is stimulant, caffeine. I mean,
Mhm.
that's a real simple thing, man.
Yeah.
We all know that we can all drink a pot of coffee before we go to bed, and it's not going to affect us. It's
Well,
not
I
going to
think
keep us up.
that's the interesting thing about the executive function disorder is that stimulants don't they don't stimulate us. They actually
No,
bring us down,
they
which
bring
to
us
your
down.
point,
You know,
we would sit at IHOP and drink like 5 pots of coffee or more.
yeah,
And both of us be like, I'm exhausted. Let's go
yeah. Let's
home.
go.
And we would just walk
Yeah,
out of there just mellow as shit.
I can remember Jason coming to me, and I can remember, other friends coming to me and saying, "Matt, you gotta slow down." And I mean, these are friends that I would party with. And so, if you've got your party friends coming to you saying, "Bud, you gotta slow it down a little bit."